Welcome to Halitics. Hope you had a great weekend, and that somewhat arguably insincere smile is courtesy of Arlen Grossman, the progressive pundit, joining us this morning. Arlen, you said smile a little bit more. Once you saw that grin, you might have been thinking, maybe he shouldn't smile so much. I'm not sure, though.
Well, you always seem so serious, Hal. You don't need to be that way all the time.
Well, we talk serious topics here at Halitics. It's not a laugh riot. It is not a fest of humor, although I try to be funny when I possibly can. We did have the humorists last week, Thursday. I don't know if you caught it, with Felicia and Liz, and I'm actually going to go hopefully see them. The comedy show they're doing, Equal Means Equal, in Manhattan on the 14th. I put the link to it if you're in the New York area, or you can get there on Thursday the 14th. Hope you'll join. So there's some humor for you. There's some comedy, Arlen. Today, though, I think a little more serious topics. And you wanted to sort of lead off. Arlen joins us every Monday. I call him the progressive pundit. I think I'm a little farther to the left. Maybe I'm beyond progressive. Maybe I'm something else. I don't really know. A lot of people call themselves progressive. Arlen is certainly progressive. I think our goals are similar, our aims, maybe the way we think we can get there isn't always the same. So Arlen, you had mentioned you were watching Morning Joe. You know who used to love Morning Joe? The late lamented Q, Dennis Carantes. He was a big fan of that program, if you recall him.
Sure, of course.
It's sad, these folks that we did radio with, it's been a long time now, almost 20 years since I started Arlen in 2005. So we've lost a lot of folks over that time. It's sad. I'm sad to say.
It's amazing how fast the years fly by.
And they accelerate as we age, unfortunately.
I noticed that too.
All right. So you wanted to sort of focus in on, I think, what maybe you found surprising. Apparently, Joe and Mika found quite surprising how Trump is maintaining a remarkably large lead over every other Republican at this point.
Yeah, for some reason, all the Republicans, or a great majority of the Republicans, just believe in Trump no matter what happens to him, no matter how many indictments, no matter, what kind of trouble he's in. They're just all the way with him. They think he's great. And so Joe and Mika and the other panelists were trying to figure out how come, why is he so popular? Why don't they see what we see? And apparently they don't. Oh, and then they were also talking about it being more of a cult than anything else. That's the reason for the big lead that Trump has, the reason for all the confidence and that the MAGA people have in him. And that makes sense to me. I don't see the Republican Party anymore. I see a Republican personality cult.
Well, you have posted a meme on Facebook that basically reflects that view. I have some issues with it, but we'll get to those. I'm just curious, though. Trump clearly maintaining a very, very big lead over all the alternatives, getting like 3-4 times as much as DeSantis in some of those polls, more than 4-5 times, and then no one else is even that close to DeSantis. Did the panel, or did Joe or Mika talk about how popular Trump is as an individual, or did they only focus on how he's doing much better than DeSantis and the others? In other words, it could be that they don't love Trump necessarily, the base. It's just they can't stand any of the others, or they just don't like any of the others. I mean, Biden has a huge lead in the Democratic race, and I don't think anyone's talking about how much love and support he gets. It's just people don't really like, or they really aren't familiar with RFK Jr., Marianne Williamson, or Dr. West. So maybe that's the same dynamic here. Everyone knows who Trump is. He was president. He was a game show host. He's a self-promoter par excellence. Nobody really knows. And you even said, who is Ramaswamy? You didn't even know who he was. I don't. Vivek, I know is his first name. That's about as much as I know. And he's of Indian descent. You
But
know,
he's ahead of Pence and Haley and Christie and Scott.
exactly. So is that part of what's going on here? It's not so much that people love Trump, or at least beyond his core group, his core followers. It's that they don't know and or don't particularly like the alternatives in the Republican field.
Not really. I think it's more a case of they just love Trump because I'll show you something interesting here, or I'll tell you something interesting. That poll, that CBS poll says top reasons for considering Trump among those who are or might. And 99% say things were better under Trump. And 95% of Republicans say he fights for people like me. I mean, that's crazy, in my
Well,
opinion.
I get he fights for people like me. I'm not clear on things being better when Trump was president. I get right now times are there are a lot of Americans are struggling. Yes, the market has been up, although recently it's been dropping. But in terms of, greater access to health care and a bunch of other factors, I don't really think there's much difference between Trump and Biden, and there has been inflation. So I don't really see why people would necessarily say things were better under Trump. Maybe for some of them it is. They are. Maybe they're looking through the future with rose-colored glasses, as we often do. Fights for people like me. That's a tough one. I mean, Trump, to get whatever you think of him, he did talk, he did campaign in red states and in purple states, and he did seem to capture a certain level of anxiety, the way Bill Clinton did when he ran. And I don't know whether you want to give Trump credit for that or want to blame his voters, but I think there's something to that.
I think, I'll give him credit for just being the greatest con man, I think, in the history of this country or the world. I mean, he's gotten people to believe all these things that aren't true. And they will just accept everything he says and go with it. And it's just baffling to me, but he knows what to say. He knows what gets people fired up, like drain the swamp kind of a thing. When, of course, he did the exact opposite. He filled the swamp up with a lot of, monsters, I guess. But people believe, they remember those words and they think he was telling the truth.
Well, I mean, let's face it, there is a swamp, and at least he talks about it. Maybe, and I agree with you. He doesn't walk the walk, but you can make the same argument about Democrats. For example, the Democrats talk a good game about the climate crisis, but really haven't taken the steps necessary to even start the process of reducing our consumption of fossil fuels. So this is what politicians do. They identify people's concerns, talk about them, act like they care, and often couldn't give a rat's fat ass one way or the other.
Well, you're right that the Democrats are not doing all they could for climate change, for fixing it, but at least they're doing something, and you could point to things that they've done. While the Republicans are pretty much don't believe in it. They don't believe human caused climate change is a real thing. So that's a whole lot worse.
Well, there's no question that Trump has captured something in many Republicans and appeals to them, and you can see it in those numbers. Wouldn't you say, Arlen, though, that this is actually probably a benefit for the Democrats? I have kind of come around to your way of thinking that given his legal problems, and I do think, unlike some YouTube hosts, even some that I've in the past felt an affinity towards, I think the charges that are at least in Georgia are serious, are legitimate, and he's facing real legal jeopardy. Doesn't that then augur well for whoever the Democrats nominate, presumably Biden, in the general election next year, since they're almost certainly going to be facing Trump? Or if not Trump, somebody who's clearly not very popular.
Well, yeah, you're right. I mean, unfortunately, the Democrats have not, and Biden have not been able to really uh, get their popularity up there because it's just stayed low. I'm not sure they may think that Biden's too old or whatever, but so he's got a lot of work to do. One thing I do is blame. I think they deserve more credit is the right wing media, the Fox Newses and the Newsmax and all the other outlets that I think they convince a lot of people that what Trump says is true and that the Bidens are a crime family. And apparently, it connects with a lot of people. They must just talk in the same circles and, reassure themselves that's what's going on, even if we don't see it.
Well, I would say this, Arlen. I mean, that's part of it, but don't you think the Democrats themselves, by the policies that they pursue, also deserve a significant amount of blame? I mean, even like actions like the Affordable Care Act haven't really improved the circumstances when it comes to the healthcare options or availability for tens of millions of Americans. We are seeing unaffordable college for tens of millions of American students. We are not seeing the Democrats take action on that. There has been inflation. We're not seeing the Democrats fight that by, say, forcing corporations to compete against each other on price. So I mean, these are very serious issues. We are seeing a bloody carnage that's costing us many billions of dollars in Ukraine. And most Americans, myself included, don't see any value for us in being there. And at the same time, see a lot of harm resulting from our, and I know you and I don't see it the same way, but putting yourself in the shoes of barely surviving Americans, can't you see that this confluence of factors, whether you accept the climate cataclysm as human caused or not, people are living through many climate emergencies and often feel that they're not getting government support that they need, such as in deep blue state Hawaii. Doesn't all this suggest that the Democrats have a lot of work to do to govern better and to regain the trust of the American people?
Well, Hal, you and I always have that same argument that, I think the Democrats are doing things that are certainly not enough, not what you and I would like, but I think it's impossible for them based on the current political climate we have. The Republicans are going to block everything he does. And then you got a few people like Joe Manchin that are going to block things. So I think Biden is doing maybe as much as he can realistically. It's not going to be enough for both you and me and a lot of progressives, but I think he's got some things he could point to and say, yeah, we did this, we did that. And
I mean, it's just where we really, really, truly disagree. I just cannot see it that same way. And that's fine. We're allowed to disagree. But so let's just talk about, if we're not going to be able to agree on the quality of governance by Democrats when they have a majority and by their presidents, how do we try to persuade people that even if the Democrats aren't great, and I have trouble with this argument because I don't honestly think Joe Biden is a step up. I certainly didn't think Hillary Clinton was a step up from Trump, and I don't regret that. I do not see a difference in quality, or not a significant enough difference in quality between Democrats and Republicans at this time. I did in the past. I did in 2000. I don't think the Al Gore Nader analogy to Jill Stein and Hillary, or to Jill Stein and Biden is fair for that reason, and we can get into that as well. But I just now want to talk about ways to try to bring Republicans into the fold. And remember, last thing, I know this is a long speech, Arlen, a lot of A lot of Barack Obama voters voted for Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Do you think that this type of post, which you put on your page, do you think this is going to appeal to them or cause them to reconsider their change in allegiance?
Well, there's no question. There's a lot of hard right Nazi type people that are more and more attracted to the Republican Party and are more able to express it and get away with it. Even Trump himself, has gotten away with a lot of things that nobody else would have gotten by before. So, yeah, there's a lot of that, but I think Republicans don't see much of an alternative. They see the Democrats and Biden as being terrible, doing a horrible job, which I don't think they are. I think they're doing relatively well under the circumstances. I mean, what more can Biden do that he isn't doing now that would get past, Congress? And that's where I think we differ. I just don't think he's got a lot of wiggle room.
Well, he certainly doesn't have to be dumping billions of dollars into Ukraine. Is an example. He could have pushed a lot harder for a $15 minimum wage. He didn't have to include. He didn't even have to broker that dirty debt ceiling deal with the Republicans, which both led to the Mountain Valley Pipeline being approved, Joe Manchin's pet project, which is a huge carbon bomb, and also led to the reinstitution of debt collections on students, which is going to be very, very painful on student debtors, I should say, because they're not students anymore. But on those who have student debt, they are now going to have to start repaying that debt. So these are areas where Biden and the Democrats went along with the Republicans. It wasn't.
I don't think they had any choice. Well, I mean, when they were deciding whether to, government should keep going and all that, the Republicans, if they didn't get at least something from the Democrats, they would have shut down the government
and shut it down. Then just force a constitutional confrontation. Don't shut it down. Force a constitutional confrontation. In the past, when this has happened, most voters have blamed the Republicans, not the Democrats. I think you make it very, very clear we're fighting against these policies that are very, very unpopular that the Republicans want us to institute. And I think they would win that argument.
Well, the thing is, the financial experts were saying that if the government was shut down, the economy would crash or at least get, considerably worse. And that's where you'd have to worry about.
Well, I wouldn't let it shut down. I would fight them tooth and nail on that. And also, Arlen, there were other ways. They could have simply stopped all that Ukraine spending, which would have meant we wouldn't be ratcheting up against the debt ceiling, which was a big factor. There was a lot of ways the government could have cut back on some spending. Biden could have talked about, and we shouldn't be spending so much money, that we're kicking the can down the road. Why not insist on much higher taxes on the wealthy and let that be a debate? None of that was on the table. None of that has been discussed. Biden didn't even need to let it get to that point. They could have, and the Democrats, they could have just simply passed legislation during the lame duck session in 2022 that raised the debt ceiling. There were a number of options, which is what happened when Trump was president. The Democrats refused to do any of that.
Well, of course, you have a situation now where the House is controlled by Republicans, so that's.
But it wasn't during the lame duck session in 2022.
Yeah. And another thing that we disagree on is Ukraine. I don't think we have much choice other than to put a lot of money into it. It's something that we can't let Putin win. And right now, it's not like Ukraine is doing so great. They're just
it's terrible. It's an awful situation. There's 500,000 plus casualties, and the country's being destroyed. Our efforts there have only made things worse. They've only kept this thing going. And when I say our efforts, I mean our blind support for Ukraine. Why aren't we pushing both sides for an immediate ceasefire? Why haven't
Because
we been for well over a year now?
because I don't see how you're going to get a ceasefire. Putin
Well,
is
why not
not.
try? We don't. How do you know? This isn't going well for Russia either. They're losing people. They're losing troops. They're spending billions of their dollars as well, or rubles, or whatever currency they use. They would love an exit strategy. We have put their backs against the wall, just as we have Ukraine's. We basically said to both of them, this war is going to continue forever.
Yeah, but I don't think Putin is going to go along with any peace plan.
Well, how do we know? How do we know when we haven't tried?
How do we not know that they've been doing it?
There's been no call for ceasefire. There's been nothing in the media. There's been no talk. When China and I guess it was Turkey tried to broker a peace deal, Blinken said no, there can't be until they withdraw to the pre-invasion borders and agree to give up Crimea. Well, obviously that's a non-starter. You don't negotiate, but you don't insist as a condition of negotiation that the other side concede. Why would they concede before there's even negotiation? They're getting nothing out of it.
Sure, but what would a peace plan look like? I mean, I can't see Putin going along with anything other than just complete control over Ukraine, and Ukraine is not.
He's not. No, he's not going to. He doesn't. You talk to him. You say, let's put the arms down. I think that would have to be the concession is that some of the Russian gains, the Russian territorial gains, would have to stay in Russia, or at least be some sort of part of a truly demilitarized zone. That would be a concession that would have to be made. But let's try. Let's talk about it. Let's see what Ukraine will agree to. Let's see what Russia will agree to, rather than just, as you pointed out, the what do you call it again? The counterattack has stalled. It's been a disaster. It's led to more deaths and the eastern Ukraine is and much of Ukraine is now a moonscape.
Yeah, it's really bad over there for both countries. But you don't know what Putin is thinking. You're thinking, oh, Putin will go along with this or that. But Putin is the type of person, at least he's shown in the past, that he only wants victory. But
that's what we're saying. We're saying the exact same thing. I don't know. Maybe you're right. Maybe a ceasefire will not end hostilities. But why not try? There hasn't even been an attempt. And again, Blinken said in Helsinki early in the summer, we're not going to talk to Russia till they give up the territory they've seized in the initial offensive. Well, that's not how you have negotiations. That's when you demand unconditional surrender. Sometimes, yes, you do that, say, against the Nazis. This is not that situation.
Well, we all want peace, and I'm sure, in fact, the whole world would like peace there, and for the fighting.
Do you think Lockheed Martin wants peace, Arlen?
Well, there are exceptions, of course.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we don't all want peace.
Yeah, but the Ukraine is not going to give up any of their territory, and nor should they. I mean, Putin had no reason, to go in there and just attack and try to take the country over. That's not right. That's illegal, and it's. Not, he shouldn't be doing that. And at the same time, Ukraine, is trying to keep a hold onto their country, and people seem to want to do whatever they can to do that. And unless we keep putting in a lot more money for weapons, things will start turning toward the side of Russia. So.
You're watching Halitics. I'm just going to cut Arlen off real quick. I'm going to let him have the last word on this conversation unless you join us. 240-363-7190. Obviously, we are not seeing eye to eye on a lot of issues, but that's often the case, and we're kind of going back over a little bit of trod ground, but I do want to get into the conversation about discussion, how we persuade people to support candidates that we like. But I'd love to talk to you. 240, Arlen would love to talk to you. 363-7190. We got the setup going really well. Pleased about that. And don't forget, click subscribe. It's in the bottom right. There's a little blue and white square. It's really easy to do. Just click that blue and white square that says subscribe. Also, one other point, we've got some great guests following Arlen this week. Tomorrow, Vernon Bohr. He'll be the opposite of progressive. He's a conservative pundit. Vernon will be joining me, and we'll be talking perhaps the hurricane and the climate cataclysm. That's an issue he and I do not see eye to eye. And later in the week, I'm going to be debating the Ukraine war with another listener caller, William Neal. William is much more to the left when it comes to the Democratic Party, far less a believer in their probity than I am, but he seems to agree with Arlen on Ukraine. So we'll get to talk to William about that as well. So Arlen, real quick, don't you think, though, if you want to win elections, the goal should be to try to appeal to as many people as you possibly can, to find issues that are relatively popular across the board, not to insult people who vote for the other side. And that's why I really have a problem with this, because you're criticizing the voter. Fine to criticize Trump, fine to point out where Trump isn't helping his base. But you're saying to the base, you're a bunch of Nazis and Klans people and haters. I don't, somehow I think that's not going to work.
That's not quite what I'm saying. That's not quite what I'm saying, Al. But there are those among them who are, obviously. But I think the Democrats are actually trying to, get their word out there. They're starting to put some good ads up, and the truth is, the economy is doing relatively well compared to what people thought it would be. I mean, inflation is going down a bit. The stock market is going up. Employment is good. There's a lot of things that look really good. But of course, Fox News and all those other right-wing sources are going to say the opposite. But I think he's got a lot to say that's positive. And I think, but why it's not working now, I don't know.
Well, why not go into Ohio? And Barack Obama won Indiana in 2008, and he won Ohio, I believe, in both 08 and 12. So what is it that happened to the 40% of voters in those two states who voted for Obama and now are voting for Trump, including, we're seeing a larger percentage, still small, but a double-digit percentage of black men? What's happened to them?
Well, that's the question the Democrats have to deal with, and it's not easy. But then again, like I say, the other side is just, all they do is attack. They just take the worst possible things and push it. It's so stupid to say Biden crime family when we know Joe Biden has been in Washington for decades and has a reputation as being a moderate kind of a guy, an ethical kind of a guy, and they're trying to make it sound like he's a criminal, and so equivalent to Trump, that they all should be in jail or whatever. So I think that's a big part of it, the push toward attack against the Democrats and against Biden. Maybe persuading some people, and I'm sorry to hear that, because I think the other side has no compunctions about that. They're willing to just do whatever it takes to say whatever they want to do to make the Democrats lose, because that's all they want to do is gain power.
All right, Arlen with us. Let's move on to, unless you have anything else you want to add on this, because and it's related, but you brought to my attention an article by Thom Hartmann. And I, by the way, say Thom because there's that H there. And my mom pointed out that on my last show, I incorrectly pronounced the word scion, S-C-I-O-N. And I don't always, but I sometimes say skyon, partly because I've never been certain how to pronounce it. I had to go back to YouTube and play 3 times. How do you pronounce Scion? But I thought it was Scion. She's right. No, she's right. She's right. Yeah. But also because when I say it Skyon, I think people will know what word I'm talking about. Whereas otherwise, if it's Scion, I never know, right, what it is, because it's like cyanide or something. All right, so Arlen, Thom Hartmann. Now we get through this. You brought this to my attention. This is in response to my repeated insistence, and this was, by the way, our promotion slide, which was I say you must, and Arlen says you can't vote for Dr. West. So you are agreed with by Hartman. Um, let's talk briefly about this. See. I feel like he makes the same arguments you do, and I find it very, very frustrating. Because I don't hear him tell us why we need what's good about. Well, a couple of things I think he gets wrong, but let's start with this. So here it is. Do you want to you lead in? This was your article. I don't want to take away your thunder, Arlen. Go ahead.
Well, I can read what we have up here. We can't afford any more George W. Bushes or Donald Trumps, who were both brought to us by Democratic leaning voters thinking they were doing the right thing by voting for third party candidates. So the whole point is that you don't want to get a third party candidate to take votes away from the Democrats and make it easier for the Republicans and Trump to gain power. And that's crucial because I think it would be the end of this country, pretty much the end of democracy in this country, were the Republicans to win again, and especially Trump. So I think we really have to have Joe Biden and the Democrats win. And so I think what Tom Hartman is saying, yeah, you can vote for Cornel West, but only in a state where it really doesn't matter. But if you're in a swing state where it could make a difference, then you really have to vote for Biden.
Well, and I think, does he say in that article, and I did read it, but now I'm sort of losing my thread, that he in fact voted for Nader in 2000 because he lived in Vermont, so it didn't matter. I think he said that.
Yeah, he said something like that, and I've done the same thing myself because it doesn't matter in California. They're going to go Democrats, so it doesn't really matter what what you vote on. But that's just the problem. Tom Hartman spends a lot of time talking about how bad our system of voting is, and it's so true. We're worse than other countries, Europeans who could vote for third party candidates and have a lot more choices than we do. Our choices are so limited by the Constitution, and it's so hard to change all these things. And it's it's so dumb that we have a system where somebody who has less votes than somebody else can still win the presidency. It's just absurd.
Well, I want to get into this because I was very intrigued by a lot of what Hartman wrote. And one point, and I certainly agree with what you just said and what he said, is that it's better in many European countries because you can vote for your preferred candidate without fear that you'll be helping a worse candidate. And I don't think he mentions ranked choice voting. He talks much more about parliamentarian systems and multiple party systems where you have proportional representation. But his example, France, was, I thought, a very poor one for this reason. The French leader, the highest elected official in France, is actually a president, like in the United States. And they did have a 3-person race recently. It was Macron, who's won, he's the president, Marine Le Pen, who's the daughter of Jean Le Pen and probably a proto-fascist or neo-fascist. I know she would fight that. I don't know how true that is. And then there was also the communist candidate. I think his name is Mélenchon. So it's a little confusing because Macron, maybe I'm wrong about that. But in that race, it was the majority or the plurality winner who turned out to be Macron. So you did have the same exact dynamic in France as you do in the United States when it comes to president. In other countries like UK, Israel, Germany, you have a prime minister, and the prime minister has to get a majority of votes in the parliament. And since you may have multiple parties there, they have to build a coalition government. So in that case, yes, you can vote for the Green Party in Germany, and your Green Party representatives will presumably vote for the most progressive and hold out. But you don't have that in the United States, obviously.
Yeah, that's a big difference. Is that a third party or an alternate party can actually get into the government and serve in their parliament, and we don't do that in this country.
No, but you made a good point, Arlen, which is that the reason we don't have a better system is in part because of utter intransigence by both political parties, which view the current system as best for them, not what's best for this country. Wouldn't that change If they started losing votes, hemorrhaging votes to third parties and fourth parties like the Libertarian Party, like the Green Party, if they started struggling to get 25, 30, 40% of the vote and were losing elections as a result, when they suddenly say, this isn't so great, maybe we got to come up with a different way of electing people.
The problem here, though, is we revere our Constitution. It's the greatest piece of written law ever. But the fact of the matter is, it's outdated, and there's a lot of things wrong with it, and it's not really appropriate for the modern times that we're in. But it's also impossible or virtually impossible to change it, because to have an amendment is just so difficult.
If we had ranked choice, I don't think ranked choice voting requires a constitutional amendment, and we could certainly choose. We could choose our president, and states are largely free under the Constitution to choose how they vote and how they elect people. So we could have ranked choice voting in each state to choose. Yes, the electoral system is ensconced in the Constitution, but not how each state chooses its electors.
Well, around the country, there is a lot of what you talked about, the ranked choice voting and other alternatives, and it seems to be working well in those places. But to do it on a national scale, would be good, but I think impossible. So, I'm not sure how much that would work.
I guess I'm saying there'd be far more pressure. The parties both would feel far more pressure to look to change the system if the current system was hurting them rather than helping them.
Of course, the current system is helping these small states and these conservative states, so they're going to be very reluctant to change, and then that's another problem.
Well, I think that is true, but I agree with you, but that doesn't mean that they would be reluctant to embrace some type of ranked choice voting. I also think the Democrats have, largely failed to reach out to voters. Not, Wyoming, some of these Western states are kind of exceptional, but on the other hand, a lot of demographic changes seem to help Democrats, such as Texas becoming a majority minority state. In other words, whites may no longer be the majority in Texas. And that's the third largest state when it comes to electoral votes, or the second after California. Florida. I mean, these are states that Democrats should be winning, but they're not, because they don't reach out to the poor. This is where you and I will totally disagree. They don't reach out to the poor, struggling, working class voters in those states. They just won't do it. They won't betray the funders, their financiers, and that's why they lose, in my opinion. Not because of Nazis and Klans persons and stuff like that. It's because the Democrats don't champion working people.
Well, I think they should too, and I agree with you. And they're not doing it enough. And a state like Texas, I've been hearing for seems like a decade or two that things are going to change in Texas, and the Democrats are going to, get control. But it never happens.
No, it doesn't. It hasn't happened. And part of the reason it doesn't happen is because there's a solid conservative core of Latino voters. And when I say Latino, I don't mean immigrants. I mean families that may have come to Texas before almost any of the white families did, that have been for 4, 5, 6 generations in Texas. And many of them are conservative and affluent themselves. And also, there's a very cultural conservative streak also among many Latinos who do come in, who are immigrants, but they're Catholic, and they're anti-choice, and they may have concerns about the homosexual agenda. And so, if Democrats can't appeal to them on economic issues, they're going to lose many of their votes, which they do.
Oh, well, like I said, we agree on that. They really have to push those kind of things and not push the cultural things, identity politics. But there's a lot more work that the Democrats need to do, and they need to get stronger. It seems like the Republicans are just a stronger party. They seem to be willing to do almost anything to get more power. The Democrats are more, laid back and polite.
Well, I mean, they will do anything but tack to the left on economic issues. That's what they won't do. They'll do anything but betray their Wall Street donor class. So let's get into more of Hartman here. I was never, as many know, I wasn't a big fan of his when he was on in Monterey. I preferred Ed Schultz, Big Eddie, who also, by the way, we mentioned people who have died. He has also died, late lamented Ed. So Hartman says and this is what I can't stand, is that sort of what, for me, only telling half the story. Yes, I don't want any more, for sure, George W. Bush's, whom I've argued was the worst president of the 21st century and one of the three worst this country's ever suffered through. Donald Trump, also a very poor president. I agree, we can't afford any of them. But can we afford, and you and I would disagree, can we afford drillers like Joe Biden in the White House getting reelected, who are dumping our treasure into endless carnage? I find that a very frustrating caption by Hartman, a refusal to acknowledge the Democratic complicity in the elections of certainly Trump. With regard to and then I have a problem here. I don't like conflating Bush and Trump. I think they're very, very different. Trump, earlier than just about any national political figure in either party, for example, opposed Bush's war on Iraq. So I think it's unfair to conflate the two. They're not the same. Trump went after the Bush family long before he even went after Hillary and called her crooked Hillary. He talked about the Bush crime family, I believe. I may be wrong about that. I can't remember, but he was, the whole stuff with low energy Jeb and all that stuff. I also question the brought to us by Democratic leaning voters. I really do. That I think is fair when it comes to W. I buy that. I found Nader's candidacy to be very, very troubling on a number of fronts. I thought Gore was a good candidate. I thought he was clearly superior in many ways, in every way, to George W. Bush. I didn't think Hillary was clearly superior to Donald Trump in many areas. I thought in some areas he was better than she was. When it came to trade, at least his rhetoric, when it came to endless war, I thought he was better. I also question whether Trump was brought to you by Democratic leaning voters. I think more people voted, by the way, for Trump and the libertarian Gary Johnson. They together got more votes than Hillary and Jill Stein. So if anything, Trump was hurt more by libertarian voters than Hillary was hurt by Stein voters.
For some reason, Trump has this magic kind of charisma that he could convince people that he's going to be on their side and he's, one of them. And so you get Democrats who will vote for him and minorities who will vote for him, even though it doesn't make sense, logically. But he's able to do that just because of the kind of person he is. He's a super con man. He's, charismatic. People want to hear what he says. And, he's all over the news all the time. So, that's what we're dealing with.
All right, Arlen with us on Halitics. We got about 10 more minutes. I want to show one more slide from Hartman, but if he had other comments or that you found particularly, elucidating or interesting, Arlen, please share them, because I feel like I have this unfair advantage over you sometimes in these discussions because I get to choose. I kind of have more control over the topics than you. And I do ask people, so people feel like, well, it's not really fair. That's probably true. This stood out at me, not because I'm brighter than Arlen and more informed, but because I get a little bit of control over the show's direction that he doesn't have.
Let's put it this way, Al, you're a bully.
Okay, fair enough. I try not to be. I will say this, to the extent I'm a bully, that's what doing these programs is all about. I think every single host I've ever seen on them is a bully. Is that fair?
Well, certainly you're the one that owns the ball, so you could make the rules, So, what can we say?
Okay, so Hartman says the best way to solve the problem of some, not all, some Democratic politicians not being as progressive as we like is to get active by joining the Democratic Party and becoming a force for positive change. Do you agree with that? I see you nodding. Is that, I mean, but what about the response that we've done this and we've tried and we've tried and we elected Barack Obama. We united to elect the first black president and he wasn't progressive. And we've been doing this we got behind the squad and they're not progressive. Maybe you think they are, but I would say they're not. I know many other progressives are profoundly disappointed. We say, hey, at some point, it's on them. It's not on us. We're doing the best we can to elect progressives. We've elected a bunch and they're not on our side.
Well, I think the problem here, Hal, is I don't think you're being very realistic. You expect, Biden and the squad and everybody to have all these progressive policies. But the fact of the matter is we live in the United States of America where, capitalism is in control. People are relatively conservative and the Republicans have a lot of power in Congress. So I think it's a whole lot tougher than I think you do to get progressive ideas across the board. It's just this is the reality of the country we live in.
I think a lot of folks would say, you're right, it's really hard, but it's impossible if you don't fight for them, and we aren't seeing them fight for these issues, for the policies that we believe are critical.
They're trying, but I think they just don't have the ability based on the system that we live in right now. So
okay, anything else on this? And then I want to move on to a tweet from Senator Nina Turner that intrigued me, that irritated me, and that ultimately I had to recognize was legitimate.
Okay.
So you're familiar with Nina Turner? She was a supporter of Bernie Sanders. She ran for Congress in Ohio, losing twice to Shontel Brown, first in a special election, and then subsequently in the regular election. She's very progressive, although even there, some on the left, not so much me. I've met Nina. I know Nina. I like Nina. But I have also felt that there have been times when she wasn't as far to the left, wasn't as prepared to take on the Democratic establishment as I would like. And one of those times was this morning when I saw this tweet where Turner, SNT, as some of us call her, Senator Nina Turner, SNT, if you want to be president, you should be able to debate your ideas. And then Donald Trump confirmed Sunday that he'll be skipping the first Republican primary debate. So she's saying, hey, he can't even debate his ideas. He doesn't deserve your support. And I'm like, okay, but what about Biden? The DNC isn't going to have any debates either. So why isn't she criticizing the DNC? But I assume you're going to, I don't know, reaction, Arlen.
Well, my first reaction is, are they still called tweets? Because, now that Twitter has changed to X, I don't know what they're called now, but
that's a great question. I love that. Are they called X's? It's confusing if they're called X's, right? But maybe.
I don't know what Elon Musk is doing, but he's not doing very well with what used to be called Twitter. So, but now she's saying, what did you want me to respond
well,
to?
Well, let me say it this way. If I'm a Republican voter, I don't know that I would even need to have a debate because, let me say it this way. I would love a debate, but I don't know that I need to see Trump debate because I already know. Trump's in the news all the time. He's debated many times. What's the value of having him on the stage? Let's get all the other candidates on that stage and they can talk about the policies they'll pursue and why they believe they'd be better than Trump. I think that's fine. I don't think Trump needs to be at that debate. But I also was frustrated by it because I felt that she was ignoring the fact that the Democrats aren't going to have a debate at all. At least the Republicans are debating, and then you can choose if you want to go or not to that debate.
Yeah, of course, nobody prominent is stepping up on the Democratic side. I don't, see any senators or, well-known people that are, you've got a few Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and you've got Cordell West, but they're not.
Well, West isn't running as a Democrat, so he wouldn't even be there. So that is fair. But Marianne Williamson is, and she did run in the last cycle. And I guess there was a moment where her popular, her support reached like 2%. So
Yeah,
there's
she's
that.
not real strong, obviously. But I think Trump was probably. Uh-oh.
Oh, are we losing you? Got a
I
little
think my phone
feedback.
call
Oh,
is. I gotta
well,
turn
I'll
off.
just mute you first. I'm not hearing your phone, fortunately. I know I always leave my phone in the other room. I've done this as well as listeners, loyal listeners know. By the way, we've got a few more minutes if you want to call in 240-363-7190. We got a late start, so we'll go a couple minutes into the 1 o'clock hour. And quick kudos to the Spanish women who won the World Cup. They beat the Lionesses from England. I supported England. I was disappointed, but Spain played great. The Olga, that's what she has on her shirt. I know she has a different last name. I don't know what it is, but a lot of the Spaniards put their first names rather than their last names on their shirt. And Olga was great. She scored an amazing goal in the corner there. So congratulations, Spain. You totally deserved your win. Arlen, go ahead. Yes, about the debate.
I've got a little trouble here because I've lost the Zoom and I don't know how to get back.
Oh,
but I can hear you.
And we see you. So just,
okay.
I wonder why you are.
Somehow the phone just wrecked everything. And
oh, that's too bad.
Get back. But anyway, we're almost done.
Well,
anyway.
I'll just continue. So bottom line is, I don't support Trump. Bottom line is, I think it's fine if I'm a Republican challenger to Trump, I probably want him at the debate because obviously there'd be a lot more people there. They get more news coverage. But I think there's an advantage too, where you get to get your thoughts out. You get to stand up against the other candidates. And hey, if one of them is able to kind of break free a little bit of that pack, whether it's DeSantis or someone else, and their numbers go up, maybe then Trump really will have to debate them. So I actually don't agree with Nina here. I think it's fine for Trump not to appear, and I think Republicans know Trump well enough that he doesn't need to be there. That said, and this is the only thing I would say, Arlen. That said, I was critical of Nina because I felt that she wasn't playing fair. She was only pointing out the Republican failure or the failure by Trump, but not Biden's refusal to debate. And I was 100% wrong there, as you can see from the slide. Well, as you can't see, but I can see, and as others maybe can see. Let's see if we can show this a little bit better. Senator Nina has actually been really good about, and one of the few to say, hey, the Democrats need to debate also. And I give her a lot of credit for that. So here's from The Hill back in June. And the headline from The Hill is Biden allies brush off calls for primary debates. And then Turner says, and let's see, I'll show this on the screen. I would be stunned if any progressive in Congress called for the DNC to hold debates, said Nina Turner. And believe me, I would love to be stunned. So she's saying, no, the Democrats do need to hold a debate. And here's the difference. Trump doesn't want to appear, don't appear, but have your debate. Biden refuses to appear, but have your debate, Democrats as well. Let's get to know the candidates like RFK Jr. and Marianne Williamson a little bit better. That's my issue. And I'm glad that Turner said the same thing.
Well, I'd like to see the Democrats, somebody in the Democratic Party who has some substance, not RFK Jr. and, somebody like a senator or somebody that willing to take on Biden, but nobody's really stepping up. So that's the problem with, you can't have a debate if you don't have any prominent people to watch.
I think they would view it as political suicide if they, remember Bernie wouldn't challenge Obama in 2012. And this was at a point where Obama was talking about long-term cuts to Social Security. And even then, Bernie would not challenge him. Yeah, and Bernie's not even a Democrat, frankly.
Yeah, it's hard to do it. It's hard to go against the establishment. People are pretty much saying, Biden is the Democratic candidate and he should be. But if his poll numbers don't rise any higher, then maybe we ought to consider an alternative, somebody who is, prominent and well-known and liked. that would be nice. Somebody like, I don't know, Newsom maybe, but I'm not a big fan, but he'd at least be prominent and somebody that would get people's attention. You know, and as far as the Republicans are concerned, yeah, obviously, if Trump was in there, he would just take over like he does everything else, and he's obviously smart strategy for him not to be in that debate because he's doing so well without being in debates. So that's understandable. But I'll tell you one thing: I'm really interested in seeing what Chris Christie has to say to the other candidates because Chris Christie's going to really go after uh, Trump, and the others not so much. Although I'm starting to see a little bit of DeSantis starting to, go against Trump. I mean, he's desperate to try some new strategy.
I think they're positioning themselves to be the Veep candidate, Arlen, and with the thought that unlike Pence, they won't have to actually serve under Trump. So the goal here is to do well enough to not attack Trump so that Trump will choose, if you're DeSantis or whoever you are, Trump will choose you as a running mate. Trump loses, and then you're positioned to run in 2028. I think that's really what is going on there. The problem is, what if Trump wins and then you're stuck like Pence was, trying to be part of, clearly a administration that's lost.
I don't think Trump's going to be there in the end. I don't think he's going to be the Republican nominee. And one reason I say it is because and I've said this before, I think there's going to be a plea deal at some point where Trump's going to be allowed to not go to jail, not have any penalties if he'll agree not to run for office again. That would, to me, it would make sense, and I think it's something that Trump may ultimately have to do. So we'll see.
All right, Arlen, before we let you go, we're getting towards the end of a full hour of back and forth, which I've really enjoyed and appreciate very much. I thank you. I'm sorry for bullying you to the extent I did. What's the wet? Now in California we have this hurricane, which is rare. I'll be discussing that more tomorrow with Vernon and the implications it has for climate crisis. How are things in Vermont? Is it unseasonably warm there? I know there were floods earlier, I believe, in the summer.
Yeah, they had some really bad weather, probably the worst they've ever had in many parts of the state. And right now, Vermont is being Vermont. It changes all the time. It's warm one day, cold another day. It rains about every 2 or 3 days. So it's a lot different than where I live in Monterey. That's for sure.
Would you consider retiring there?
I don't think so, just because I don't think I could handle a winter here. It gets awfully cold in the winter, and I don't certainly look forward to that. That's when it's nice to be in California.
We sort of have the best of both worlds, don't you? You get California for 9 months, and then Vermont for what, 2 or so.
A little more than that.
So yeah, a little more.
I get
3.
Vermont for about 4 or 5 months, but I think we do have a pretty good situation, and I'm happy to. I hope we can keep doing that for as long as we can.
Well, here's another thought for you on the retirement front, Arlen, and this will be our sign off for you to respond to. There is a serious movement in Oregon that is apparently really gaining steam to have universal single payer health coverage, possibly called Medicare for All. This could happen as soon as 2025. I don't want to be too optimistic. I know Vermont experimented with that and ultimately backed away. It looks like Oregon has a real shot. Would that be enough for you to consider moving to Oregon?
Not necessarily, but I wish them the best. But it's very difficult to do that, obviously. And if they're able to do it, it would be great to see what happens to their state. But I'll probably stay in California. I've got Medicare.
You've got your Medicare, but I think there would be still advantages. No co-pays. Every medication would be completely covered, so you'd probably still save some money. Honestly, Arlen, if this happens, and of course it would be a joint decision with my wife, but I would certainly look very, very closely at relocating for our golden years.
Well, it's a beautiful state and it's a good place to be. So I wouldn't rule it out.
All right, that's going to do it with the wouldn't rule it out. A definitive maybe from Arlen. Actually, is more of a definitive probably not. He'd already said he very happy in Monterey, which is certainly understandable. It's one of the most beautiful places I've certainly ever had the opportunity to live and enjoyed it greatly. We'll be back. I'll be back. I shouldn't say we. Arlen will be back. I hope if Arlen will continue to put up with me next Monday or 1 week from today. Tomorrow, Vernon. And then on Thursday, I believe we'll have Bill Neal. Thanks for watching. Thanks for being part of Halitics. Click like, click subscribe.